The blade is within reach of his hand, and the room is dark, and the war has been over for longer than most men live. He is old now. The hand that finds the hilt in the dark does not need to see it. The hand learnt this grip before it learnt anything gentler, and it has not forgotten. Nobody threatens him. The door is barred. The village asleep. The fields beyond the wall quiet under a thin moon. There is nothing in the house but an old man, and the thing he keeps beside the place where he sleeps. And still he listens. He has listened like this every night for 40 years. Not for an enemy. He could no longer lift the blade to meet one, and he knows it. He listens for a sound he cannot name, the way a man listens for a footstep on a stair that was torn out long ago. It does not come. It never does. He waits for it anyway, and the waiting is the only part of the war that never ended. The records will say he came home. They will say he survived, that he returned from the campaigns intact, unwounded, whole. Whole is the word they used. It was the only word they had. What the records do not say is what came back in his place. There is no entry for it in any ledger, no line in any chronicle, no name in any tongue he spoke. The men who wrote down his century had words for valor and for sin, for glory and for ransom, and for the price of a horse. They had no word for the thing that lay down beside him each night and would not let him sleep without the blade in reach. He did not have the word either. That was the cruelty of it. A man can endure almost anything he can name. He was made to endure something that had no name at all, and he was told by everyone who loved him that he had come home lucky. So he lies in the dark, an old man with a blade he can barely hold, listening for the sound that is not coming. And somewhere far off, though he cannot hear it yet, a boy is being measured for his first sword. The first sword is wooden, and it is heavier than it looks, and the boy is 7 years old. He has been given to another man's house. This is how it is done. A son sent away to be made into something his father cannot make at home. And in the yard of that house there stands a post sunk into the ground, taller than the boy, scarred pale, where 10,000 blows have stripped the bark away. The post has a name and a purpose, and the boy will spend more hours with it than with his own mother. He does not know this yet. No one tells him. He is taught to strike it. Not in anger. Anger is wasteful, and he is corrected when it shows. But the way one is taught letters, by repetition, until the shape of the thing lives in the hand and the mind is left free to think of nothing at all. He strikes the post in the morning, before he is fully awake. He strikes it in the cold and in the rain, and on the days he is sick. He strikes it until the wooden blade splinters and is replaced, and his palms blister and harden and stop being the palms of a child. The grip he is learning now is the grip his hand will find in the dark, 70 years from now, when there is no post and no enemy, and nothing left in the world to strike. What the boy is learning is not only how to hold a sword. He is learning that the body of another person is a thing that can be opened, and that opening it is a craft, like riding, like reading a field for its high ground. The men around him do not say this aloud. They do not need to. It is there in the post itself, which is shaped, if you look, a little like a man, with a head and a place where the shoulders would be, and the master guides the boy's hands to the points where a real blade would do the most harm. He is being taught the geometry of a person from the inside out, and he is 7 years old, and then he is 8, and then he is 9. He learns to listen too. Not yet, for the sound that will keep him awake as an old man. That has not happened to him, and will not for years, but for the smaller sounds the trade requires. The change in a man's breathing before he commits to a blow. The difference between a horse that will hold and a horse that will bolt. The particular silence that falls across a yard just before the master decides someone has earned a beating. The boy's ear is being tuned. He believes he is only learning to fight. He is learning to be afraid in a useful, controlled way, and to call the result courage. Something is handed to him along with the steel, and no one names it, because no one has a name for it. It arrives in small portions, the way salt is worked into a cure. A flinch trained out of him here, a softness corrected there. The first time he watches a thing be hurt and keeps his face perfectly still, he is praised, and the praise teaches him more than any blow ever did. By the time he is old enough to be called a young man, the thing handed to him is load-bearing, fully inside, indistinguishable from his character. He believes it is his character. Everyone believes it is his character. There is no version of him left over to hold it up against. On the day they give him a real sword, edged, weighted, his own, he is proud, and the pride is not a lie. He has earned it. He is good at this, better than most, and at that age being good at a thing feels exactly like being good. He holds the blade up, and the light runs along the edge of it, and behind him, a man who loves him watches with something complicated in his face, because that man was handed a sword once too, and knows what comes after the pride, and says nothing. The blade is beautiful. He has been told all his life what such a blade is for: duty, honor, the protection of the weak, the service of God. He has heard it in the songs, and the songs are everywhere, and the songs are very good, and he believes every word of them. He has not yet learned that the songs and the sword were made by different men, for different reasons, and that no one ever meant for the two to be set side by side and compared. In the hall, after the meat has been cleared, a man stands and sings, and what he sings about is men exactly like the young one at the lower table, except that the men in the song are better. They are braver and cleaner and more certain. They die well, and their dying means something, and the meaning is audible in the shape of the song itself, which rises at the end instead of falling. The young man listens with his whole body. He does not yet know that this is the most dangerous thing the world will ever hand him, not the sword, but the song about the sword. The songs are part of a larger thing, though no one in the hall would call it a system. There is a code. It is written down nowhere in particular, signed by no one, enforced by no court a man could ever be summoned to, and yet every boy raised toward knighthood absorbs it the way he absorbs his own language, without once being sat down and taught it. Protect the weak. Keep your word. Show mercy to the fallen. Serve God your Lord and the helpless, in that order. It is a beautiful code. It is genuinely beautiful. And this is the part that matters, because a lie that is merely ugly can be resisted, and this was not ugly. This was the most beautiful idea the age ever produced about itself. The church blesses the swords. There is a rite for it. The blade laid upon the altar through the night, prayed over, returned in the morning, made holy, so that the steel which will one day open men is also, now, a sacred object, consecrated to the protection of widows and pilgrims and the poor. The church is not naive in doing this. It has watched these men for generations. It has seen exactly what they do to one another and to everyone beneath them, and it has concluded that the violence cannot be removed from them, only pointed. So it points the blessed sword outward at the enemies of God, and tells the young man that to kill in the correct direction is not merely permitted, but loved. There is one song the young man loves beyond all the others. In it, a great knight is caught in a narrow pass, far ahead of his army, surrounded, and he carries a horn, and the whole song turns upon a single sound, the sound of that horn, which the knight is too proud to blow until it is far too late, until the blowing of it bursts something in his own skull and brings the army back only in time to bury him. The young man has heard this song 100 times, and every time he waits for the horn, and every time some part of him believes that now, this time, the knight will sound it sooner and live. The knight never does. The young man loves him for it, and does not notice that the thing he has been taught to find most beautiful is a man dying for the sake of a sound he refused to make in time. The crack does not announce itself. It is not a moment of disillusionment. Those come later, if they come at all, and for a great many men they never come. It is subtler than that. It is the first time the young man notices, without permitting himself to fully notice, that the song and the field are not made of the same material. In the song, the enemy is also a knight, also bound by the code, also beautiful in his dying. On the field, the enemy will include a farmer with a billhook who has never heard the song, who does not know his part in it, who will not die beautifully and will extend no mercy he was not first shown. The code assumes that both men have read it. Only one of them has. He is nearly a man now, and nearly a knight, and the distance between the two things he has been given, the blessed sword and the beautiful song, has not yet had to carry any weight at all. He holds them both lightly, at the same time, the way a person can hold two ideas that have never once been made to meet. They will be made to meet. There is a first time coming, a first man, a first opening of a body that is not a post, that does not splinter and stand replaced by mourning. And on the far side of it, the young man will go looking for the song again, to stand inside it the way he once did, and will find that it no longer quite fits him, and will not understand why, and will say nothing about it to anyone. The first one is not a duel, and there is no music, and it happens far faster than the years of training ever prepared him to expect. There is a press of men and noise, and the particular confusion of a real fight, which is nothing at all like the clean geometry of the yard. And then there is a man directly in front of him who is trying, with genuine and undisguised effort, to kill him. The young knight does what his hands were built to do. His hands are very good. That was always going to be the problem, though he does not think it in those words, because there are no words for it yet, and there is no time. The man goes down, and he is not a post. This is the thing no one ever described. There was no profit in describing it, and perhaps no language for it either. The post took the blow and stood. This man takes the blow and changes, becomes in the space of a single breath something that was a person and is now a matter of weight and angle and a great deal of blood that is warmer than the young knight expected and closer and on him. And the man looks at him. This is the part the song's left out. The man looks at him while there is still someone behind the eyes to do the looking, and then there is not. And the young knight is close enough to watch the exact moment the looking stops. There is a sound in it, not a loud one. He will spend the rest of his life unable to describe it to anyone, partly because he will never once try, and partly because it is not the kind of sound that can be carried out of the moment that made it. It is the sound a living thing makes when it stops being one, small and wet, and entirely without drama, the least heroic sound he has ever heard. He does not know, kneeling there, that he has just heard the sound he will go on listening for in the dark when he is old. He knows only that he wants very badly for it not to have happened, and that it has, and that the wanting changes nothing whatsoever. The post could always be struck again in the morning. This could only ever be done. Afterward, he is praised. He fought well, he is alive. The men around him are pleased and clap him on the shoulder, and he understands that he is meant to feel the thing the songs always promised, the clean, fierce gladness of having done what he was made for. He searches himself for it. He finds something, but it is not that. It is closer to the feeling of having broken something that was not his to break. In a house he is not allowed to leave. And here, before we follow him out of that field, a small thing, quietly. Wherever you are listening from, whatever hour it has reached where you are, take note of it. The room, the light, or the lack of it. The time on whatever it is you use to tell the time. If you feel like it, leave it somewhere, a single line, where you are, and what hour it is there as this story reaches you. Not for any reason that would matter to anyone, but the archive, which likes to know who is awake inside it and when. That is all. Now back to the field, where the young knight is still kneeling, and the sound has not yet finished settling into the place where it will stay. He gets to his feet. Someone helps him wipe the worst of it from his hands, and someone else is already talking about the next thing, the march, the weather, a debt owed in the next town, and the ordinary noise of the world closes back over the moment, as though it had weighed nothing at all. He would do this again. His mind does not yet know it, but his hands do, and his hands are steadier than he is. Within a year, he will have done it often enough that the sound no longer arrives fresh. He will take that for healing. It is not healing. It is something else, beginning already, and it has no more name than the rest of it does. By the third year, he no longer remembers the faces. Not because he is callous, he is not or not yet, or not in the way the word is usually meant, but because the trade leaves no room for the remembering. War, he has discovered, is mostly not fighting. It is walking and waiting, and standing in a wet field at the edge of a town that will not open its gates, watching the smoke of his own cooking fire and the smoke of the enemy's, close enough that on a still day the two columns lean toward one another in the same wind. He is hungry far more often than he is fed. This surprises no one who has done it, and everyone who has only heard the songs. An army eats the country it stands in until the country is bare, and then it goes hungry. And hungry men sicken, and far more of them die of the flux and the fever and the slow rot in a wound than ever die with a sword in another man's hand. He watches men he has marched beside for a year die, shivering in their own filth across the span of a week, for no reason a song could ever use. There is no verse for dysentery. He is learning the parts of war that do not rhyme. He stops sleeping the way he used to. It happens so gradually that he never once decides it. In a country where the gates stay shut and the wind carries two fires, a man who sleeps deeply is a man who may not wake again, and the body grasps this long before the mind would think to phrase it. So the body adjusts. It learns to sleep in a shallower place, near the surface, with one layer of itself always left standing watch. He wakes at the wrong sounds, and, worse, at the absence of the right ones. The sentry who has gone too quiet, the horse that has stopped shifting its weight. He is always, now, partly listening. He does not think of it as fear. He thinks of it as competence. And the men who last longest are precisely the ones who are best at it. The sword stops being a thing he sets down. In the yard, it had hung on a peg. In the hall, it had leaned in a corner while he ate. Now it rests where he rests, within the reach of his hand, because the span between his hand and the hilt is the span between living and not. And that span has been taught to him in a language he has no way to argue with. He is not attached to the sword the way a man is attached to a keepsake. It is closer than that, and stranger. The sword has become part of the perimeter of his own body, an organ he was not born with and can no longer do without. The strange thing, the thing the boy at the post could never have predicted, is how ordinary all of it becomes. Terror, it turns out, cannot be sustained. The body will not hold it for years on end, and so it converts the terror into something quieter and far more permanent. A low hum beneath everything, present even on the good days, even by the fire, even while laughing. And he does laugh in these years. He has friends. There are nights that are genuinely good, but beneath the good nights the hum goes on, and he has stopped noticing it the way a man stops noticing a river he has lived beside. And the not noticing is not at all the same as its being gone. He believes, when he considers it at all, that this is simply what a man becomes, harder, more capable, more awake. He believes the war is something he is passing through, something he will one day set down for good, the way he sets the sword down to eat, briefly, before taking it up again. He has not yet understood the thing the older men understand and never say aloud, that the body keeps no separate ledger for war and for peace, that everything it learns in order to survive will go on being done forever, faithfully, long after the reason for it has gone. The body learns, in these years, never to rest the whole of itself at once. It is a useful thing to have learnt. He will never be able to unlearn it, and no one has told him that the lesson does not end when the war does, because the men who could tell him are far away, or dead, or sitting beside their own fires, saying nothing at all, which is the thing such men have become best at. When the call comes, it does not come as a recruitment. It comes as an offer of cleansing. A man may take the cross, sew it to his shoulder, and march east into a war that God himself is said to want, and in exchange, the whole weight a man carries, the things done and the things he has become, may be set down, forgiven, burned away in the heat of a holy errand. The knight, who is no longer especially young, hears this offer the way a man dying of thirst hears the word water. He does not examine the offer too closely, because he does not want to. By now, there is a great deal he would like to set down. The faces he stopped remembering have not, it turns out, gone anywhere. They wait for him in the shallow place where he sleeps, and the low hum has not quietened with the years, only deepened. So when the church tells him that this war is different, that to kill in this direction, toward this enemy, in this cause, is not sin, but the erasure of sin, he wants with his whole heart for it to be true. He takes the cross. He believes, or believes that he believes, which at that hour are close enough to the same thing. The road to the holy war is itself a kind of war. It is far longer than the sermons admit, and it kills without ceremony, by hunger, by fever, by drowning, by the plain arithmetic of too many men and too little bread spread across too much distance. By the time he reaches the country he was promised, he has buried friends in ground that none of them could name, under a sun that does not care which God sent them there. The holy errand, up close, smells exactly like every other campaign he has ever been on. He notices this. He files the noticing away with the other things he does not say. And then there is the city. He had imagined, across all the long road, that the taking of it would feel like the songs at last made real. That here, finally, the blessing and the blade would meet, and he would feel the thing he had been promised, the lifting, the cleansing, the proof that his hands had been forgiven. What happens instead is the worst of all the things his hands have ever done now at scale, in streets, to people who are not soldiers, while men on every side of him weep with what they are. Certain is joy. He does what is done, and the sword does what it was blessed to do. And in the middle of it he listens, for the lifting, for the voice, for the smallest sign that the weight is leaving him. And the only thing he can hear beneath the noise is the same small wet sound he has been hearing since the first field, multiplied, now past all counting, and no holier than it ever was. Afterward, they hold a service of thanksgiving. He stands among men giving genuine thanks, and he moves his mouth around the words, and he waits to feel cleansed, because he was told that he would, and the telling came from the highest place on earth a man can be told a thing from. He does not feel cleansed. He feels exactly as heavy as before, and then heavier, because until this, he could at least believe that somewhere a clean version of all of it existed, that the songs were true in some country he had simply not yet reached. He has reached it. This was the country, and there is nowhere further to go for the version in which it is beautiful. He keeps this to himself, of course. A man does not rise after a holy victory and announce that he feels no holier. There is no safe ear for such a sentence, and in any case, he has no words with which to build it, even alone, even for himself. So he carries the new weight the way he has learned to carry all the rest of it, quietly, near the surface, one layer of himself always left awake to guard it. But something has shifted that he cannot shift back. He had been keeping, without quite knowing that he kept it, one last door open. The belief that there existed somewhere a cause large enough and holy enough to make what he did to other men mean something other than what it plainly was. That door is shut now. He will go on fighting, because there is nothing else he knows how to be. But he will fight now as a man who has run out of the reasons that work, and he has not yet discovered what a man is supposed to do with his hands once the reasons are gone. There is a man he would die for. This surprises him the first time he notices it, because he had thought the trade had taken from him the very equipment for that kind of feeling, and yet here it is, undeniable, aimed at a man he met in a muddy camp some years ago, and now cannot picture the world without. They are not alike, and that is part of it. The other man laughs easily, a thing the night has long since forgotten how to do, and so he borrows it, stands near the laughter, warms his hands at it, the way the whole camp does. The bond has a shape the age knows how to recognize. Men who fight beside one another long enough come to swear it openly, to be as brothers, to share what they take, to carry one another's bodies home if it should come to that, to guard the back the other man cannot see. It is not sentiment. It is survival, dressed in the language of love, which, across enough years, becomes indistinguishable from love, and may as well be called by its name. In a world where the songs have stopped working and God has gone quiet, this is the one thing the night has found that is exactly what it claims to be. The man at his side will not lie to him, will not leave him, will not flinch. He has tested it. It has held. For a while. And this must be said carefully, because the night does not yet know the ending the way we do. For a while, things are almost good. Almost is the largest word available to him. There are evenings around a fire when the talk is only talk, when no one is dying and no one is about to, when the laughter does its quiet work and the hum beneath everything sinks low enough to be ignored. In these evenings, the night comes as close as he will ever come to the man he might otherwise have been. He does not know that he is living, right now, in the part of the story he will one day try hardest to return to, and never quite reach. It happens on an ordinary day, which is how these things happen. Not in a great battle fit for a song, in a skirmish, and nothing, an action so small that it will be recorded nowhere except inside one man. The night is perhaps 30 feet away. He sees it, he sees the whole of it, from the instant it becomes inevitable to the instant just after. And 30 feet, he discovers, is exactly too far. Near enough to watch, too far to reach, the worst distance there is. He has watched a great many men die by now. He had believed himself past the capacity for it to mean anything. He learns, across a handful of seconds, that he was wrong. That the capacity had never left him, only waited for someone he could not afford to lose. Afterward, there is the body, and the body is the easy part. The body he knows what to do with. The trade taught him that a long time ago. What he does not know what to do with is the silence in the exact shape of one man's voice. The laugh that is simply not going to happen again. The half sentences he had stopped listening to closely because there would always be more of them, and now there will not be. For weeks he catches himself listening for it. The way the tongue keeps going to the gap where a tooth used to be. They give him the dead man's sword, because someone must take it, and he was the nearest in every sense, and he carries it now alongside his own. One more thing that has outlived its purpose and cannot be set down. He does not weep, and that is the part that unsettles the few who notice him in those days. He goes very quiet and very capable, and for a stretch afterward he fights with a cold efficiency that the younger men admire and the older ones recognize and quietly step back from. Something in him has been spent that does not refill. He had not understood until now that the bond was load-bearing, that the one true thing had been holding up a great deal of the rest of him, and that with it gone, the structure does not collapse, which would at least be an event, but only settles lower and permanently into a shape that will never again stand quite upright. He goes on. That is the terrible thing about him, the thing he will never forgive in himself, that whatever happens, he goes on. And he has begun, dimly, to wonder what it is exactly that keeps going. When the boy who went looking for a clean war is gone, and the friend is gone, the thing that walks on in their place answers to the same name, and is not, he is fairly sure, the same. Almost none of them ever wrote anything down. They were not, for the most part, men of letters. The hand that knew the sword did not often know the pen, and even those who could write left us ledgers and land grants and the dry business of estates, not the inside of themselves. The inside of a man was not considered a thing one wrote about. And so they come down to us as armor with no one inside it, effigies, names cut in tombs, figures in the songs. We know what they did. We have almost nothing of what it cost. Almost. There is one exception large enough to matter, and his name was Geoffroy de Charny. Charny was, by the reckoning of his own century, very nearly the perfect knight. Not a brute, and not a dreamer. The genuine article, respected by men who respected almost no one, trusted with the things an age hands only to its best. He had done everything the trade asks of a man, for longer than most men live to keep doing it, and he had done it well enough that when he spoke of what knighthood was, men fell quiet and listened. And late in his life, he did a thing the others did not. He sat down and he wrote a book about it. The book is, on its surface, an instruction manual. How to be a knight, what to prize, what to shun. Much of it is what you would expect. But Charney, unlike the songs, does not lie about the cost. He writes about the fear. He writes about the cold and the hunger and the sleeplessness. About the man lying awake, wondering whether he's a coward. About an exhaustion that reaches deeper than the body can account for. He writes that the life he is recommending is one of very nearly continuous suffering. And then he recommends it anyway, and the honesty and the recommendation sit side by side on the same page without his ever quite reconciling them. He is describing 600 years too early, and without the words for it, the precise conditions a much later age would learn to recognize as the ones that break a mind. And here is the strange and moving thing, the thing that makes the book matter far beyond its century. Charney does not appear to be writing about himself. He shows no sign, anywhere in it, of believing he is describing his own wound. He was, as far as anyone can tell, steady to the very end, one of those rare men the thing seems to pass through without lodging. He is writing about the others. He has watched them, his companions, the younger men, the ones who came back wrong from what they had all endured together, and he is worried about them. In a way his age had built no proper channel to hold, and he reaches, in his plain soldier's prose, for some way to say what he has seen in their faces. He gets very close. He sets down the cause and the toll and the symptom. He never reaches the word, because the word is not there to be reached. And so the thing he saw in his friend stays, in his book, a description with no name attached to it, which is, as it turns out, the most honest form the truth could take in that century. Somewhere among the men, Charney watched and worried over, there is the one we have been following. Not by name. We will never have his name. He is one of the thousands who left no book behind them, but by kind. He is precisely the sort of man Charney meant. Capable, quiet, intact, by every visible measure, carrying a thing he can neither set down nor describe, and being told by everyone near him that he is one of the lucky ones. Had he ever read the book, and he almost certainly never did, he might have found himself in it, and the finding might have been the nearest thing to relief he was ever offered. The discovery that at least one other man had seen the shape of it, even with no name to hang upon the shape. There is a temptation, looking back, to feel grateful to Charney, that someone at least came close, that the silence was not total. But the closeness is its own cruelty. He reached the edge of the word, and the word was not there. And so even the finest and most honest witness the age produced could do nothing for the men he feared for, except describe them exactly, and hand the description forward across 600 years, to people who would at last possess the vocabulary, and could do nothing for them either, because they had been dead a very long time. The book survives. The men it was trying to reach did not. And our knight, who never read a word of it, walks on through his own years toward an old age he does not yet know is waiting, carrying the unnamed thing a little further down the line. And the age, watching him go, reaches once more for a word, and finds, in the place where the word should be, only the thing it had put there instead, a penance. The penance has a price, and the price can be counted. This is perhaps the strangest thing about it, and the most revealing. A man comes home from a war the church itself has sanctioned, has blessed, has called holy, has sworn will not be held against him, and that same church, on his return, sits him down and holds it against him. There is a reckoning. For each man you have killed, so many days, so many weeks of fasting and prayer. The very blade they consecrated upon the altar must now, it turns out, be answered for. The most famous of these reckonings was drawn up after a battle that turned a kingdom over in the course of a single afternoon. The victor's own bishops composed it, not the defeated, the victors. A careful schedule of penance for the men who had won, graded by what each of them had done. 1 year of penance for each man killed. For the soldier who could no longer say how many, a penance measured in years regardless. For the archer, who could never know whose arrow had found its mark, a lighter and vaguer sentence, since the church, even here, was trying to be just. They had won. The cause had been blessed. And still the churchmen understood that something had been incurred which a blessing did not cover. Read it now, and you can watch the church straining towards something true. It had observed these men for centuries. It knew, in the way an institution knows a thing without being able to say it, that a man who kills is not afterward the same as a man who has not. That something crosses over in the act and does not cross back. That the killer carries home a residue the blessing fails to rinse away. The penance is an attempt to deal with that residue. It is, in its clumsy and serious way, the age's one organized response to the wound, the only structure it ever built to receive the man who came back carrying something. And that is the part that is almost unbearable looking back. That they saw it, that they saw he was injured, and were not blind to it at all. They saw it, and they called it sin. That is the whole of the tragedy, compressed into a single word. The thing the man carried home was not, in any sense he could have used, a sin. It was a wound, the entirely predictable injury of having been made to do the thing he was made to do. But the only frame the age possessed for a hurt of the soul was the frame of guilt. And so the wound was filed as guilt, and the cure prescribed was the cure for guilt. Atone and be made clean. The man knelt and atoned. He said the prayers, kept the fasts, served out the years. And he waited, as he had waited once in the holy city, to feel the weight at last lift. And it did not lift, because a man cannot atone his way out of an injury, any more than a broken leg can be forgiven into setting straight. And here the wrong name does its quiet, terrible work. Because the penance does not work, because the weight stays, the man is left with only the one explanation his age permits him, that the fault must be his own, that he has not atoned hard enough, that a truer night would have been cleansed by now, and that his failure to feel clean is simply the measure of how much sin is still in him. The injury, left untreated, is now compounded by shame, and the shame is administered by the very institution meant to help in complete sincerity, in the honest belief that it is doing him good. He leaves the penance heavier than he came to it. He thanks the priest. There was no one, anywhere in the whole of his world, to tell him that the heaviness was not a verdict upon his soul. He carries the penance home the way he carries everything now, quietly and alone, one layer of himself always left awake to guard it. And home is where he is going in these years. The wars are not endless, even when they feel it. And there comes a season when a man is finally finished, or too old, or simply released, and turns at last toward the place he began. He thinks of it, on the road, as the end of the thing. He pictures a door and a threshold, and people who knew him before all of this, and he believes that crossing back over it will return him to the man who left. He has been told this too, that he is coming home. It is one more word his age is using wrongly. He will not discover that until he is standing on the threshold itself, with his hand on a door that opens, exactly as promised, onto a house in which he no longer fits. The house is exactly where he left it. This is the first cruelty, and he is not prepared for it. He had imagined, on the long road, some change that would come out to meet him, but the door is the same door, lower than he remembered, and the smell of the place when it opens is the smell he carried in his chest through every camp and every winter, unchanged, waiting for him as though no time had passed at all. The time passed in him instead. The house kept none of it. And so he stands on the threshold, holding years the house has no room for. And he steps inside anyway, because there is nowhere else left to go. The people are there, and they are glad, and their gladness is real, and he cannot reach it. They waited for him. They prayed for him. They imagined this day and arranged it with care. And the man they are welcoming home is the man who left, and that man did not come back. Someone else came back wearing his face, and is performing now a careful and exhausting impression of him, embracing the right people, saying the things that are said, sitting in the old chair at the old table, while underneath it all the layer that never sleeps stands guard over a room in which nothing whatsoever is wrong, and finds it almost unbearable that nothing is wrong, because the body no longer knows how to be anywhere, that nothing is wrong. At night, the house is quiet, and the quiet is the worst of it. For years his body has slept in places thick with meaningful sound. The sentries, the horses, the breathing of men he would have died for. And it had learned to read every layer of it, to wake at the wrong note, and sleep through the right ones. Now there is nothing to read. The silence of a safe house gives his listening nothing at all to do, and so the listening turns inward and goes looking, and finds the sounds it knows best, and supplies them itself out of memory in the dark. He lies in a bed softer than any he has known in years, beside a person who loves him, in a house where he is entirely safe, and he has never in his life felt less able to rest. There was a man in those centuries who saw this and tried to set it down. A chronicler, writing of the soldiers who came home from one of the holy wars, reached for some way to say what was wrong with men who had, by every visible measure, come through unharmed. What he wrote was that although their bodies had returned whole, without a wound upon them, their hearts had been run through, as if by swords, pierced by a grief of some kind he could not fully name, opened by something that left no mark any physician could find. It is one of the closest anyone ever came. He understood that the wound was real, and that it lay somewhere a blade could not reach, and he borrowed the image of a blade to say so, because the language of blades was the only language his age kept ready for the hurts of fighting men. He had no better word. No one had. But he saw, as Shani saw, that the unharmed men were not unharmed. We are, you and I, halfway now. Halfway through his life, and halfway through this account of it, which feels like the right place to pause for just a moment and say the plain thing aloud, that you are still here. Stories told this quietly do not hold everyone. They ask for a kind of attention, The world does not usually reward, and you have given it this far to a man who left no name and was told that he was the lucky one. If it has been worth the while, if you would like the archive to find you again when the next of these is ready, then a quiet mark of it, a like, a subscription, is enough. Not for the noise, only so that the work of remembering men like him need not be done entirely in the dark. And the dark is where he is. So let us go back to him, to the safe house, and the soft bed, and the listening that has nothing left to listen to. He does not, in the end, put the sword away. There is a chest where such things are meant to go, where a man who is finished with war is supposed to lay the blade down and close the lid and become once more a man of the house. And he opens the chest, and he fully means to, and he discovers that he cannot. His own blade, and the dead man's blade he has carried since that 30-foot afternoon, do not go into the chest. They come to rest, instead, within reach of where he sleeps, because the span between his hand and a hilt is the one piece of the war he was never able to leave behind on any field. And on the first night home, in the safe and silent house, beside the person who loves him, he reaches out in the dark to be certain the sword is there. It is. That is the night the rest of his life quietly begins, though it will be years before anyone, himself included, understands that the war did not end when he came home. It only moved in with him. Every night, he checks that the sword is there. He does not decide to do it. The hand does it on its own. The same hand that learnt the grip at 7, reaching out into the dark to touch the hilt the way another man might touch the shoulder of a sleeping wife, to be sure she has not gone. The sword is always there. He put it there himself, and still the hand goes out, every single night, because the body does not trust the memory of having set it down. The body trusts only the present proof, the cool of the metal beneath the fingers, now again confirmation renewed, each night, that the one thing standing between him and a danger he cannot name has not, while he slept, slipped quietly away. In the war, all of this had made sense. The hand on the hilt was answering something real, a real enemy, a real night, a real and reasonable chance of dying in the dark. The vigilance had a direction. It pointed outward, at the country beyond the fire, and it kept him alive. And being kept alive felt like proof that the vigilance was correct. But the war is over. The country beyond the fire is now a quiet village that has known him since he was a boy, and there is no enemy in it, and there has not been one for years, and the vigilance has not noticed. It goes on pointing. It points at the dark, at the door, at the ordinary sounds of an ordinary house, and finding nothing there to justify itself, it does not stand down. It looks harder. This is the thing no one of his age could have explained to him, and the thing he half understands and cannot bear to finish understanding. The watch he keeps is no longer set against anything outside the house. There is nothing outside the house. The enemy, his vigilance, strains toward night after night, hand on the hilt, is not in the village, not beyond the door, not anywhere a sword could be of the slightest use. And some part of him has begun to grasp that the only place left for it to be is inside, behind his own eyes, in the one country no blade has ever been able to reach. He goes on checking the sword regardless. It is the only defense he was ever taught. That it guards against nothing actually coming for him does not stop him reaching for it, because a man fights the war he was trained for. Even after the war has moved somewhere, his weapons can no longer follow. The body pays for the watch, and it pays at night. A man is not built to keep one layer of himself awake for 40 years. The body was meant to set the watch down sometimes, to sink the whole way under, to mend itself in the deep place that sleep is supposed to reach. He never reaches it. He sleeps the way the camps taught him to sleep, shallow, near the surface, ready. And he wakes many times in a night, often at a sound. And the sound is sometimes real and small, a beam settling, a bird in the thatch. And sometimes there is no sound at all, and he wakes regardless, into a heart already pounding and a body already certain that the thing has finally come for him. A long moment before the mind can arrive to tell it that nothing has come, that nothing is coming, that it is only the dark again, only the house, only the sword exactly where he left it. In the daylight he is, to most eyes, simply a quiet man. A little hard to reach perhaps, a little far away even while sitting in the room, given to long silences and to a stillness the village reads, generously, as the gravity of a man who has seen things. They are not wrong that he has seen things. They are wrong about the stillness. The stillness is not peace. It is the surface of a vast and constant effort, the look of a man holding something down with the whole of his strength while appearing to do nothing at all. He is very good at it. He has had a lifetime of practice at appearing to do nothing while at war. No one sees the work, and that too is part of the wound, that the better a man learns to carry it, the more certain everyone around him becomes that there is nothing there to carry. There is one thing he cannot entirely hide, and it waits for him at the place where vigilance and surprise meet. He trained, across a lifetime, to lay his hand on a weapon faster than thought, to let the body answer a sudden thing before the mind has any chance to weigh it, because in the war, the men who waited to be certain were the men who died. That training did not retire when he did. It is still there, still loaded, beneath the quiet surface, waiting for a trigger it can no longer reliably tell apart from a real one. And the safe house is full of sudden things. A dropped pot, a door flung open by the wind, a small child who has discovered that it is funny to startle the grandfather. He does not know yet that one of these ordinary sudden things is going to find the old machinery still armed, and that the hand is going to answer exactly the way it was built to answer, faster than he can call it back, and that everything in the house is going to change in a single instant around one small sound that meant nothing at all, and a hand that did not know the war was over. It is a sound behind him, in the afternoon, in the one room of the house he had finally let himself relax in. Only a sound, a child's voice, pitched suddenly loud and close at his back, meaning nothing but mischief. The small cruelty of children who have found a man who can be made to jump and decided it is the finest game in the house. The sound arrives. And before the child has even finished the word, before the man has any say in the matter at all, the thing he has carried for 50 years answers exactly the way it was built to answer. The body turns, fast, far faster than an old body should be able to turn, and the hand is already moving, not toward the child. The hand does not know it is a child. The hand is moving the way it moved in the dark of 100 camps. Toward the place a threat must be met. For the length of a single heartbeat, the man is not in the room at all. He is somewhere else entirely, somewhere the turning and the reaching are correct, where a sound at your back is the last warning you will ever be given. And his hand closes hard on the child's arm, with the grip that crushed and held across a lifetime of war. And there is a terrible instant in which the whole machinery is engaged and aimed, and nothing in the world but its own arrested motion stands between it and a small body. And then the man comes back. He arrives in himself a fraction of a second behind the hand, the way the mind always arrives a fraction behind the trained body, and he sees what he is doing, and he stops. The stopping costs him more than any blow he ever struck in his life, because stopping is the one thing the body was trained never, under any circumstances, to do. The child is unhurt. That is the first thing, and the only thing that truly counts in the reckoning of it. The child is frightened badly, and will cry, and will not understand, but is not hurt. What is hurt is something that cannot be set back in its place, because everyone in the room saw it. They saw the speed, which was not the speed of an old man. They saw the face. For the half-second it stood uncovered, and the face was not the face of the grandfather they knew. It was someone older and colder and very far away, a man none of them had ever met, who had been living inside the quiet one all along, behind his eyes, keeping the watch. And then the grandfather's face came back down over it, stricken, and he let go, and stepped back, and there was nothing at all he could say, because there had never been a word for the thing they had just, for the first time, seen. After that, the house changes, quietly, the way a house changes around any danger it has decided not to speak of. No one announces a rule. The rules simply appear, and everyone learns them, the children included, who are spoken to in low voices and do not need telling twice. You do not come up behind him. You do not wake him with a touch. You speak from across the room and wait for him to surface on his own. You do not slam the door or let the heavy pot fall. You give him the seat that faces the entrance, always, and you never once say why. The family becomes, without anyone ever choosing it, a kind of quiet staff for the keeping of a thing they cannot name, fluent in its triggers, watchful of its weather, organized in every small habit around keeping it asleep. They love him. This is what their love has had to become. He notices the rules, of course. He is, after all, a man trained to read a room for its smallest change, and he reads this one perfectly. The new care with which he is approached, the way the children's games fall quiet as they near him, the seat left empty for him without a word. He understands that they are afraid of him, that the fear is entirely reasonable, and that they are managing him out of love. And each of these understandings is its own separate wound. Someone suggests, gently, just once, that perhaps the sword need not stay beside the bed. He says nothing. He only looks at them, and the subject is never raised again, because they can see in his face that the sword is not a thing that can be discussed, that to ask him to give it up is to ask him to lie down unarmed in the dark against something that has been coming for him for 50 years. They do not understand the thing, but they have seen enough of it now to stop asking. So they live with it, all of them, together, around the unspoken shape of it. And the living with becomes the ordinary weather of the household, the water it swims in, invisible precisely because it is everywhere. And he is, in the bitter accounting of his age, one of the fortunate ones. He came home, he has a roof, and people beneath it who love him, and the means to grow old. There were others, he had known some of them, for whom even this much was never possible. Men in whom the thing did not stay quiet and manageable behind a careful set of household rules, but rose up and took the whole of them, and put them out onto the roads, or into the long silence of the cloister, or somewhere no one living could follow them. The age had a way of speaking about those men. It was not a kind way, and it was not a true one, And it is where we must go next, because to understand what was done to the ones who broke, you have first to hear what the world decided to call them. The world called them mad when it was being plain, and possessed when it was being pious, and simply lost when it had given up on them altogether. And not one of these was the Word, because the Word did not exist. These were the men in whom the thing did not stay down. The household rules and the careful seat and the quiet management were not enough, or came too late, or were never offered at all. And the watch they could not stand down at last consumed the very men who were keeping it. They stopped being able to perform the impression. They wandered. Some walked out of their own lives one ordinary morning and never came back, and were found occasionally, years afterward, on a road far from anywhere, answering to no name, or to a different one, or to none. The break took the shapes the age left open to it. Some withdrew into the silence of the cloister, and the age approved, and called it a vocation, and did not look too closely at how many of its monks were men who had once been soldiers, and could no longer bear the company of the living. Some took to the roads as wanderers and beggars and holy fools, and the age had a slot for them too, a little lower down. And some simply went quiet, all the way quiet, and stopped speaking, and sat in the corner of someone's house for the remainder of their lives, present and absent at once, having mislaid somewhere along the road the thread that connects a man to his own name. The age looked at these men and saw a failure of faith, or of will, or of breeding. It did not see an injury, because it had decided long before what injuries were, and they were wounds, and these men carried no wounds. And yet, and here is the strange door the age left standing ajar without ever seeming to notice, the story's new. The very same century that had no word for the wound, and no account of it but failure or sin, sat in its great halls and listened, rapt, to tales in which the finest knights of all went mad, not minor figures, the best of them. In the most celebrated of these poems, a knight named Ivan, brave, honored, everything the songs most admired, breaks all at once, and tears the very clothes from his body, and flees into the forest, and lives there as a beast, naked, wordless, eating raw whatever he can catch, having forgotten entirely that he was ever a man with a name and a place among men. He is not alone in it. The greatest knight in all the stories, Lancelot, the one no enemy on earth could defeat, is undone again and again, not by any enemy, but from within, and runs mad into the wilderness more than once, losing himself, losing his name, becoming for long stretches a thing that wanders and does not know what it is. There is a pattern here, repeated across poem after poem, and once you have seen it, you cannot stop seeing it. The knight at the very height of his powers, who has done everything right, who is the best there is at the trade, and who breaks suddenly and totally. And the first thing he does every time when he breaks is strip off his arms and his armor and throw them to the ground. In the stories, the casting away of the sword is the sign that the man is gone. The age understood, in its fiction, that the weapon and the madness were somehow the same subject. But notice what the stories do with it. They never once say that the war did this. The knight in the poem does not break because of the men he has killed, or the friends he has buried, or the years of sleeping with one eye always open. He breaks because a woman has spurned him, or because he has failed some vow he swore to her, or because an enchantment has been laid on him by a sorceress in a wood. The cause is always love, or magic, never the trade itself. And so the age performs a remarkable trick, without ever once knowing it is performing it. It permits itself to look directly at the thing, the knight destroyed from the inside, stripped of his name and his arms, running mad among the trees, but only on the condition that the true cause is kept off the page. The fiction is allowed to show the wound, so long as the fiction lies about where the wound came from. It names what life did not dare to name, and misnames it in the very same breath. Our knight, who keeps his arms close and his name intact, and his madness behind a door the householders learned never to open, is the other ending of the same story, the version the poems decline to tell, because there is nothing in it a hall would care to hear. He does not run into the forest. He does not strip off the sword. He clings to it. He holds the whole of it down, year upon year, and stays. And the staying is its own kind of disappearance, slower and quieter than the wild man's, and far less visible. And no poem will ever be written about it. And across all those years, through every shape the breaking takes, the wanderers, the silent ones, the wild men of the stories, and the still ones like him who never break loudly enough to be noticed, the age keeps reaching for some way to explain the thing it is plainly looking at, and keeps coming back with the same three answers, and not one of them the word. That the man is melancholy, or that the man is possessed, or that the man has been struck down, for reasons of his own, by the hand of God. When the family at last takes him to someone, and they do once, in a bad winter, when the silence in him deepens towards something that frightens them, the someone is a physician, and the physician has a word ready, and the word is melancholy. It is the best word the medicine of the age can offer, and it is not nothing. It says, there is too much of a certain darkness in you, a heaviness in the blood, a humour gone to excess. At least it is an account that does not require him to have sinned. The physician prescribes accordingly a change of diet, a letting of blood, less red meat, more rest, the avoidance of solitude and of black thoughts. The man listens politely and follows none of it. He understands, without any means to say so, that the physician has correctly seen that something is wrong, and has placed it in entirely the wrong country, in the blood, where it can be drained, rather than in the years, where it cannot. For the worst cases, there is a louder word, and a louder remedy. When the thing in a man rises high enough to be seen, when he cries out in the night, or speaks to people who are not there, or has to be held, the age stops calling it an imbalance and begins calling it a presence. He is possessed. Something has got into him, something from outside, and the cure for a thing from outside is to drive it back out. The prayers, the holy water, the long and frightening work of exorcism, performed in earnest by men who truly mean to help. And the dreadful logic of it is almost sound. The man does seem inhabited. There is something in him that was not there before, that wakes him and rides him and will not be reasoned with. They are wrong about only one thing. The thing inside him did not come from outside. He carried it home himself, in his own body, from a war they had blessed. And you cannot cast out of a man the things that he has done. And when neither the blood nor the exorcism works, when the heaviness will not lift and the presence will not depart, the age has one explanation remaining, and it is the cruelest of the three, because it is the one that closes every door. It is the hand of God. The man is being scourged deliberately by a just and all-knowing God, for sins he may not even recall committing, and his suffering is therefore not an illness to be cured, but a sentence to be served. There is no appeal against this verdict, and no physician for it. It asks the man to read his own torment as the proof of his guilt, and it falls upon a man already half convinced, ever since the penance failed, that the fault was his from the start. The three names make a kind of staircase, each step lower than the last. Melancholy said the blood was dark. Possession said a devil had entered. The hand of God said he had earned every hour of it. And not one of them said the only true thing his age had no way to say. That this was done to you, that you did not choose it, that you are not guilty but injured, and that the injury is entirely real, even though it has, as yet, no name. The absence is not a small thing, not merely a word missing from a dictionary. A thing without a name cannot be properly thought. It cannot be set at a distance and looked at. It cannot be cut free of the man who carries it. He can point to his sword and name every part of it, the pommel, the grip, the cross, the long bright length of the blade, because the age gave him exact words for the instrument, words worn smooth with use. It gave him not one word for what the instrument had done to the man who wielded it. And so the sword is a thing he has, and the injury is a thing he is. The first he can hold at arm's length. The second has no edge he can find, because a wound you cannot name does not stay a wound. It spreads quietly until it is indistinguishable from your character, until you can no longer tell where the thing the war did to you ends and where you begin. And there is a second cost, quieter than the first, and in some ways worse. Without a name, there can be no testimony. The man cannot tell anyone what happened to him, not the physician, not the priest, not the person who loves him and lies awake beside his unrest, because telling requires words, and the words do not exist, and the thing that cannot be told cannot be shared, and the thing that cannot be shared must be carried entirely alone. He has spent a lifetime listening, for the enemy, for the sentry, for the friend's voice that never came back, for the sound of his own absolution that never arrived. And the one sound he needs now, more than any of those, is a word, a single word, in any tongue, that one other human being might say to him, so that he would know he had been understood. He listens for it as he has listened for everything else. It is the one sound his entire world is incapable of making. So he stops waiting for it, the way he stopped waiting for the rest, and carries the untellable thing in silence, the only vessel his age has left him. He is old now, in the part of the story we keep circling back toward, and there is one mercy in it, if it can be called a mercy at all. The body that kept the watch so faithfully for so long is at last beginning to fail, and a failing body has less strength to spare for vigilance. The nights grow no easier, but the days grow quieter, not from peace, but from exhaustion, the slow running down of a machine that was never once allowed to stop. The hand that flew to the hilt faster than thought is slower now. The grip is weaker. He can still reach the sword in the dark, and he still does every night. But he is beginning to understand that a night is coming when he will reach for it, and his hand will close on nothing he can lift. And the watch he has kept for 50 years will have to be stood down at last, not because the war is finally over, but because the soldier is. And he finds, to his own quiet surprise, that he does not know what he is without the watch, that he has been the watch for so long he can no longer locate, beneath it, the boy who was handed a wooden sword and told that this was the man he would grow up to be. The strength goes the way the songs never mention, slowly and from the edges inward. First, the long marches he no longer takes. Then the stairs that have somehow grown taller. Then the morning he cannot, on the first attempt, rise from the chair and pretends he was not trying. The body that was the whole of his value, trained from the age of 7 to be a weapon, and a very good one, for 50 years, is being quietly taken apart by time, the one enemy it was never taught how to fight. He watches it go with a strange detachment. He had assumed somewhere that he would mind more. The body was never really his. It had always belonged to the trade. He is almost curious to see what is left of him when it is finally gone. But the watch does not go with the strength. This is the particular cruelty held back for the very end of such a life, that the vigilance, which needed the body to be of any use at all, outlives the body's power to act on it. He still wakes at the sounds. His heart still floods at a door banged by the wind, still makes him ready in an instant for a fight. And then the rest of him arrives, the slow, failing rest of him, and cannot rise, cannot turn, cannot lift a hand that would matter. And he lies there in the full grip of an alarm his body can no longer answer. The soldier is gone. The sentry is still at his post. He has become, at the last, the very thing he feared most as a young man on a real watch, the one who sees it coming and cannot move. The sword stays where it has always stayed, within reach of the place he sleeps. He cannot lift it now. He knows this. He tested it once, alone, and his arm shook, and the point would not come off the floor, and he set it down and did not try again. By every practical measure, it is useless to him. A length of metal he can no longer raise against anything in the world. And he keeps it exactly where it was, and reaches out in the dark each night to be certain of it, because the reaching was never really about the lifting. The sword beside the bed is not a weapon any longer. It is a habit older than most of his memories, the last unbroken thread running back to the boy at the post. And a man does not surrender the last thread merely because his hand has grown too weak to use what hangs from the end of it. He touches the cold of it. It is still there, and that is enough. It was always, in the end, the only thing the touching was for. And here, near the end, something the trade never once accounted for begins quietly to surface. The person who has lain beside his unrest through all these years, who learnt the rules without ever being told them, who left him the seat that faced the door, who never got the truth of it because he had no way on earth to give it, is old now too, and the two of them sit together in the long evenings in a silence that has changed its character. For most of his life, the silence had been a wall, the thing he could never get across. Now, worn thin on both sides by time, it has become something nearer to a room they share. Nothing is explained, even now. The word still does not exist for him to explain it with. But she takes his hand sometimes, the right hand, the hand that did everything, and holds it, and does not flinch from it. And in that holding, there is a kind of understanding that never needed the word at all, not a cure, for the age has no cure to give him, but the nearest thing to testimony he will ever be offered, another person choosing to stay close to the thing she cannot name, so that he need not carry quite the whole of it alone. He still listens, in the dark, in these last years. Less for danger now. The body has more or less conceded that fight, and more, though he would never put it in such words, for the old sounds, the ones that made him, the breathing of men long dead, the shift of a horse in a camp that is dust, the laugh of the friend who never came back from 30 feet away. They reach him more easily now than the sounds of the room he is actually sitting in. The present has thinned, and the past leans close against the warm place where the wall used to stand. And beneath all of them, still, after 60 years, he listens for the one sound that never came. The small, wet sound from the first field. The sound he has waited his whole life to stop hearing, and which has never once, in all that time, agreed to be the last of its kind. What remains then when the strength is gone? Less than the songs would have promised, and far stranger. The vigilance remains, with nothing left for it to do. The love remains, having become something quieter and more durable than either of them ever expected. The unnamed thing remains, exactly as heavy as the day he first carried it home, wholly untouched by the years. Because time wears down a body, but has no purchase at all upon a thing that was never given a name to wear it down by. And he remains, diminished, frail, kept, a little while longer. But even now, in the rare clear hours, he finds himself thinking past himself, toward the question that visits the few who survive into real old age. What of all this will outlast me? He can neither read nor write. He will leave no book, as the one good witness did. He will leave his name on no document that matters, and his face on no tomb. And he is right to wonder, because the truth is colder even than he fears. The age that had no word for what he suffered will keep in its records very nearly everything about him except the single thing that was true. And to understand how a wound this large could vanish so completely from history, we have to look, at last, at what the records chose to remember in its place. Walk into almost any old church in the country he came from, and you will find him, not him, but his kind, lying in stone. The effigies are everywhere, once you begin to look for them. Knights carved recumbent upon the lids of their tombs, in full armor, hands pressed together in prayer, a faithful dog or a lion at the feet, the sword laid along the body, where the hand can rest upon it, even in death. They are serene. That is the thing one notices first and remembers longest. How perfectly, how eternally serene they are. The stone knight has been at peace for 600 years, and will lie at peace for 600 more, and nothing in his calm carved face has ever once kept a watch in the dark. The written records keep the same kind of peace, by keeping the same kinds of things. The chronicles record his battles, his victories and defeats, the names of the great men he served and the great men he killed. The charters record his lands, his marriages, the passage of his property down the line. The heralds record his arms, the bright shorthand of a whole man reduced to a pattern on a shield. Between them, these records can tell you, with real precision, what a man like him did. They were built to record deeds, the public, countable, consequential surface of a life, and they do it well. And that is precisely the trouble. A deed is the one part of him that never hurt. The records caught the armor and let the man inside it fall straight through. This was not an oversight, and it was not cruelty. It was simply what a record was for. The inside of a man, what the deeds had cost him, what he carried home, what kept him awake, was not considered information. It was not the kind of thing one set down in writing, any more than a man would write down the color of the air. And on the rare occasion, someone did try to set the inside down. As the one good witness did in his book, he found himself reaching for words that were not there, describing a wound he had no name for, in a language built to record everything about a fighting man, except the fighting man himself. The silence in the records is not a gap where something was lost. It is the shape of a thing that was never, by the conventions of the age, permitted to be written down at all. And this is why the question that ought to be the simplest of all cannot be answered. How many of them were there? The men who came home carrying the unnamed thing, who kept the watch beside the bed, who broke quietly, or loudly, or not at all? We cannot say. Not approximately, not even to the nearest order of magnitude. The records that would let us count them are exactly the records that were never kept. And so the men do not appear in the great ledger of the age as a number, or a category, or even a rumor. They appear, if they appear at all, as the spaces between the entries. A knight who retires early and is simply not heard of again. A name that goes abruptly quiet in the chronicle. A son who came into his inheritance sooner than anyone had expected. If you listen to the records of that world, you will hear the trumpets and the victories and the genealogies marching down the centuries in good order, and you will not hear anywhere in the whole of it the one small sound this entire story has been about. The silence is total, and the totality of the silence is the nearest thing to evidence we will ever have of how many of them there must have been. There is a temptation, faced with a silence so complete, to conclude that the thing was rare. That these were hard men in a hard age, more or less built for it. And that the wound we are so certain of is something we have projected backward onto them out of our own softer time. It is worth pausing here, because this is exactly the mistake the silence is designed to produce. The absence of the record is not the absence of the wound. We know the conditions were there. The killing, the privation, the years of broken sleep. The friends cut down at 30 feet. Because those, at least, the records did keep. And they are precisely the conditions a much later age would confirm will break a mind, reliably, in any century, in any man. These men were not harder than we are. They were the same animal, in worse circumstances, with no word for what those circumstances did to them. What looks, from this distance, like the rarity of the wound, is only the thoroughness of the silence. There is, as there has been from the beginning, a single exception. One man whose inside we actually possess, because he broke the convention and wrote it down, and whose death, as it happens, the records also kept in full and in glory, exactly the way the records keep such things. Geoffroy de Charny did not die quietly in a bed, an old man reaching for a sword he could no longer lift. He died as the age preferred its knights to die, on a famous field, doing a famous thing, and the chroniclers set it down with care, and we have it still. And so in him, and in him alone, the two records meet. The outside the world insisted on keeping, and the inside he insisted on keeping himself. To stand at his death is to see in a single moment the glory the chronicles preserved and the cost they would otherwise have let fall straight through. It is the one place in all of this where both halves of the truth occupy the same man on the same day at the same hour. And the day has a name, and the field has a name, and we are very nearly there. The field is called Poitiers, and the day is the 19th of September, and by the time the sun stands high, it is already lost. The French have come apart against the English line, the way an army comes apart when everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. And the day that began as a battle is turning into a rout. And a rout is the moment an army stops being an army and becomes a great many men, each privately deciding to live. Most of them decide to live. They turn and they run, or they throw down their arms and offer themselves up for ransom, which is the sensible thing, the permitted thing. The thing very nearly everyone on that field is doing. Very nearly everyone. In the middle of the breaking field, one man does not run, and he is holding the reason he cannot. Geoffroy de Charny carries the oriflamme, the great war banner of the French kings, the sacred standard raised only when the fight is to be to the death, and no quarter given. To bear it is the highest honor the kingdom can place in a man's hands, and the heaviest, because the banner does not run. While it stands, the fight stands. The instant it falls, the whole army knows the end has come. And the king himself is here, on this field, in the thick of it, and the king must not be taken. So the banner stays up, and the man beneath it stays under it, in the one place on the entire field where the killing is certain to be worst. This is the man who wrote the book. The same man who set down, in his plain and honest prose, the fear and the cold, and the sleeplessness and the suffering of the nightly life more truthfully than anyone else of his age, who worried on the page about the men the trade was quietly breaking, is now standing in the exact center of the thing he described, holding it up with both hands and refusing to put it down. He knew the cost better than any of them. He had counted it more honestly than any of them. And when the hour came that the cost was to be paid in full, he did not flinch from a single coin of it. He lived his book all the way to its last line. The man who had seen the wound most clearly of anyone walked straight into the thing that makes it, and stayed, and held the banner up over his king, while the field emptied around him of everyone with the sense to leave. They cut him down at last beneath the banner, and the banner came down with him. The chronicles record it, because this is precisely the kind of death the chronicles were built to keep. The great knight, the sacred standard, the king he died to shield, the enemy's own respect for the manner of his ending. We have it still, 600 years on, in good clear ink. What the chronicles cannot tell us, what no chronicle ever could, is the last thing in his mind as the field went dark, whether it was the king or the banner, or the men in his book he had not been able to save, or simply the old reflex of a hand that would not, even then, let go of what it was holding. They found him with the standard still in his grip. He did not cast it down, the way the mad knights in the poems cast down their arms. He held it to the very end. He was holding it when the end arrived. And here is the thing that only we can see, because only we have read the book as well as the chronicle. Charny was, in the cold accounting of these matters, spared. He died inside the noise, in the one place the trade ever truly fit a man, doing the thing he believed in, witnessed and honored and written down. He never had to carry it home. He never lay in a safe and silent house, and reached in the dark for a weapon against an enemy that was no longer outside, nor kept a long watch over a country no blade could reach, nor felt the word he needed fail, year after year, to arrive. The field took him whole, while he was still entirely himself, and called it glory. And it was glory. It was also a mercy, the particular mercy of not living long enough to learn what the war does to the men it allows to survive. The most fortunate knight of his age, it turns out, was the one who did not come home. Our knight gets the other death. The one the chronicles did not keep, because there was nothing in it for them to keep. No banner, no king, no famous field, no enemy pausing in admiration. He does not die at Poitiers, or at any place that has a name. He dies, decades after the last of his wars, in the very bed he has reached out from every night of his long old age to be certain the sword was still there. An old man, in a quiet house, surrounded by people who love him and never once knew him, with no chronicler within 100 miles, and nothing taking place that the world would ever think to write down. It is the death almost all of them got. The unrecorded one, the one that falls straight through the records like the man inside the armor. And it is the death we are going to stay for, because the thing that happens in that quiet room, in the last hour of a man no one will remember, is the whole of what this story has been trying, for 600 years, to find some way to say. The dying is slow and quiet, and takes most of a winter. There is no wound in it, which is its own last irony. The body that survived a lifetime of edges and arrows is brought down in the end by nothing more dramatic than time. The lungs filling, the strength going out of him like a tide that has decided not to come back. He is not afraid. This surprises the people around the bed, who had expected, from a man so long unquiet, some final struggle. But he has been close to death so many times, on so many fields, that it stopped being a stranger to him long ago. If anything, there is something in him that has been waiting a very long time for it, and is, now that it has come, almost relieved. Even now, the watch does not entirely stand down. Drifting in and out of the light, he surfaces sometimes into a moment of the old alarm, a sound in the house, a door, a footstep, and the body tries faintly to do what it has always done, to ready itself, to reach. The reaching is almost nothing now, a flicker in the fingers of the right hand, the ghost of emotion 50 years deep. But it is still there. The sentry is the last thing in him to understand that the watch is finally ending, and it does not understand it even now. It goes on scanning the dark out of pure habit, searching for a threat in a room that holds nothing but people who love him, and the long, slow business of his leaving. She is there at the end, as she has been there through all of it. Old herself now, she sits where she has always sat, on the side of the bed away from the door, and she holds the right hand, the hand that learned the grip at 7, that did everything the trade ever asked of it, that has reached out into the dark every night of their long life together to be sure of the sword. She holds it while it makes its small failing motions, and she does not flinch, and she does not ask him to be still. She understood, a long time ago, that the reaching was not something he did, but something that was done to him, and that the kindest thing was simply to be there while it happened, and never to require him to explain. There is no word even now, even at the very end, but there is her hand around his, and his around nothing, and between them a thing that was never once said aloud and did not, in the end, need to be. And then, near the very end, something happens that has not happened in 50 years. The right hand stops reaching. It is not a decision. Nothing in him decides it. It is only that the strength for even the flicker is finally gone, and the hand goes still in hers, open, empty, no longer straining toward a hilt in the dark. And the watch he mounted as a young man on a real and dangerous night, and never once stood down, not in war, not in peace, not across the whole long aftermath, stands down at last. Not because the danger has passed. The danger had not existed for years, not anywhere a hand could reach it. The watch ends because the watchman does. And for the first time since he was a boy with a wooden sword, the man is not, in any part of himself, on guard. It is the nearest thing to peace he was ever given, and it arrives, as the cruelest mercies do, exactly one breath before the end. He dies in the quiet, the way almost all of them died. No banner, no chronicler, no field with a name, only a winter room and a held hand, and the last of the light going out of a man no record will ever keep. And he carries it out with him, the whole of it, the first man and the small wet sound, the friend at 30 feet, the holy city, the long watch, the unnamed weight he was never able to set down, because no one ever gave him the word that would have let him lift it off. It goes where he goes. No one in that room hears it leave, because it had never, in 60 years, been able to be heard. It had no name to be heard by. The truest account of his whole inner life, the real one the records could not hold, and the priests misfiled and the songs refused. It fits in the space between his last breath and the silence just after it, and it is gone before anyone in the world could know it had ever been there. The room is very quiet afterward. She does not let go of the hand for a long time, and when at last she does, and stands, and the others come, and the slow, ordinary work of death begins around the bed, there is one thing in that room that does not change, one thing that has not moved and will not. The sword, leaning where it has leaned for 40 years, within reach of a hand that will never reach for it again. It outlived the war, and it outlived the watch, and it has now, in the space of a single hour, outlived the man. And it does not know this. It is only metal, and metal keeps no vigil, and carries no weight, and forgets nothing, because it never knew anything at all. But it is about to be picked up. Someone will have to decide what becomes of it now, and the decision they make, without understanding the first thing about what the sword has been, is the last turn this story takes before it finally lets him go. They clean it first. This is the practical beginning of a relic. Someone takes the sword down from beside the bed and notices that it has not been properly cared for in years. The old man could no longer tend it and would not allow anyone else to, and so they oil it, and work the small rust from the blade, and polish the hilt his hand had worn smooth, and in the cleaning they remove, without the faintest idea that they are doing it, the last physical trace of how he actually held it. The wear of 60 years of nightly reaching, the particular dullness where his thumb came to rest, gone under the cloth in a single afternoon. What is left is a clean old sword, a fine one, they all agree, worth keeping. And so it goes up on the wall, over the hearth most likely, where such things go, high enough to be admired, low enough to be pointed at, in the warm part of the house where the family gathers. It looks very well there. It catches the firelight. Visitors remark on it, and are told that it belonged to the grandfather, who was a knight, who fought in the wars, and the telling is brief and proud and entirely true, and contains not one word of the truth. The sword on the wall says nothing of the first man, or the small wet sound, or the friend at 30 feet, or the holy city, or the 50 years of reaching for it in the dark. It cannot say these things. It is a relic, and the whole function of a relic is to stand in for a story while quietly replacing it, to give a family something to point at instead of something to know. This is how it ends for almost all of them. Not with a name finally found, not with the wound at last understood and spoken and laid to rest, but with the object kept and the meaning lost, the armor preserved and the man inside it allowed one final time to fall straight through. The family is not careless. They love the memory of him. They keep his sword with real reverence. They will hand it down through the generations as the most precious thing the house contains. And every act of that reverence carries the truth a little further, from anyone who might once have understood it. Because what they are preserving is the glory, the part that never hurt, and what they are losing, quietly and lovingly and beyond all recovery, is everything the glory was built on top of. The reverence is entirely sincere. The reverence is also the final burial of the one thing about him that was ever true. And there is a boy. There is always a boy. A grandson or a great-grandson, still small enough to have to look up at the sword on the wall, who has heard the brief proud story so many times that it has become part of the furniture of his mind. The grandfather, the knight, the wars, the glory. He stands beneath it, and he wants it. Not the truth of it, which no one has, but the shape of it. The brightness, the danger, the certainty that to carry such a thing is to be someone. He's very nearly the age the old man was when they first put a wooden sword in his hands, and began the long work of making him into the kind of man who would one day need a real one. The boy knows none of this. He knows only that the sword is beautiful, and that it was a great man's, and that he would like, more than almost anything in the world, to be allowed to hold it. And one day, they let him. They take it down, carefully, it is precious, and they place it in his hands, and they show him how to hold it, and they tell him to mind the edge, and they watch him with exactly the complicated fondness with which men have always watched boys take up the weapons that will make them. The boy holds it up, and the firelight runs along the blade, and he feels the thing every one of them has felt, the thing the songs were written to make a boy feel. No one in the room says, "This is the thing that broke your grandfather." No one says it, because no one knows it. The knowing died in a winter room with the old man, unheard and unrecorded, taking with it the one warning that might ever have mattered. And so the boy receives the sword exactly as the old man once received his, clean and beautiful, and stripped of every last trace of what it costs. The cycle does not announce itself. It never has. It simply turns in silence one more time, in the warm, firelit room, around a boy holding a blade, and a family smiling at him, and a truth that no longer exists anywhere to be passed on. We have watched all of this from a very great distance, knowing the end the whole way through, the way the boy beneath the sword cannot. We have followed one man through the length of it, from the wooden sword to the relic on the wall, and we have given him no name, because he had none that survived, and he has stood all along for the thousands who also had none. We are almost at the end of what can be told. But there is one thing left, one thing the man himself never had, that none of them ever had, that changes nothing whatsoever for him, and very nearly everything for us. One thing we possess, sitting here, 600 years downstream of that firelit room, that was not available to a single one of the men this story has been about. We have the word. It came too late for him by centuries. It cannot reach back across all that time and lift the weight from a man already long dead. But it is worth saying now, at the very end, what the word is and what it means that we finally have it, and what, exactly, it asks of those of us who do. The word is trauma. That is all. A single ordinary word that any child can now say, that did not exist in any usable form for the entirety of his life, and behind it, the longer understanding a later age would build, that a mind can be injured by what it survives, that the injury is real and predictable, and has a shape and a course, and is no more a failure of character than a broken bone is a failure of the leg. It took 600 years. It took the same wound, repeated through every war the centuries could invent, in numbers at last too vast for even the most thorough silence to swallow, before the world was forced to give the thing a name and admit it had been there, in the men who came home all along. The word arrives. It is the climax of his whole life, and he is not there to hear it, and it is 6 centuries too late. And the word does now all the things the man could never do without it. It lifts the wound off the self and holds it at a distance where it can finally be looked at, so that a man can say, I have this, instead of only ever being able to feel, I am this. It says the thing he most needed to hear and never once did, that it was done to you, that you did not choose it, that you are not guilty and not possessed and not abandoned by God and not weak, that you are injured in a way that has a name, and that a thing with a name can sometimes be helped. The word is the cure he was denied, and the testimony he could never give, arriving together in a single breath into a world he no longer lives in. It changes nothing for him. This has to be said plainly, because the comfort of a word can be made to do too much work. He is dead. He has been dead for 600 years. The word cannot travel back along the centuries to the winter room and lay itself into the silence between his last breath and the one that never came. It cannot unfight the wars or unbreak the men or give back the sleep or fill the place at the table where the friend should have grown old. Whole generations of them lived and suffered and died inside the silence unnamed. And the word, when it finally came too late for every last one. That is the consequence. And there is no version of it that does not hurt. We understand them now completely, and there is no longer anyone left to understand. But it is not nothing, the word, even arriving this late. Because the men in the firelit rooms did not, in the end, stop coming. They are still coming home, from newer wars under other names, and some of them are still met by people who love them and cannot see the thing they carry, and some of them still reach in the dark for a weapon against an enemy that is no longer outside. The difference, the only difference, but it is everything, is that now there is a word for it. Now the thing can be said. Now, when a man cannot explain why the quiet house is unbearable, or why his hand answers a sound before he does, there is at last something another person can say to him, so that he need not carry the whole of it in the dark. The way the man in this story carried his alone for 60 years, listening all the while for exactly that, and never once hearing it. The word came too late for him. The least we can do, having it, is not waste it on the ones for whom it has come in time. And so we leave him, not at the grave, which has no marker, and not at the relic on the wall, which says nothing, but here, in the understanding he was never given, and which we now hold on his behalf. Thank you for staying the whole way through, with a man who had no name and left no trace, and for giving him, in the listening, the one thing his own century could not, someone to witness it, all the way to the end. The archive keeps stories like his, the quiet ones, the unrecorded ones, the lives that fell through the gaps in the official account. And there are a great many of them still waiting. If there is one you would like the archive to find next, leave it, wherever you leave such things. The next story is very often chosen by the people who stayed for the last one. There is no hurry. The archive keeps its own slow time, and these stories have waited centuries already. They can wait a little longer for us to come back to them, and we will come back. He spent his whole life listening for a sound that never came. He listened for the enemy and the sentry, and the friend who did not answer, and the word that did not exist. And the listening was the truest thing about him, the part the war could not take, and the silence could not reach. He never heard it. But the strange thing about a word, once it finally exists, is that it can be said in any direction, including backward, into the past, over the heads of the dead who could not use it. Not because they will hear it, because saying it is how the living refuse at last to let the silence have the only say. So here it is, spoken plainly, into the dark he is no longer in. For him, and for all the ones who carried it home, and were told that they were the lucky ones. You were not weak. You were not cursed. You were injured, and it had a name, and we are sorry it took us so long to learn how to say it. History told with space to breathe. The archive will be here. Rest now.